What's up guys, Jaff is calling back again with another Pokemon Generational review. This time I will be reviewing Generation 3, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald versions. Probably the most controversial generation in terms of whether people liked it, but for all the wrong reasons. Generation 3 is still one of the few Pokemon generations I can pick up today and just start playing. Technically Generation 3 included not only Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, but also Fire Red, Leaf Green, Pokemon Colosseum, and XD Gale of Darkness. I will only be focusing on Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. So, with that being said, let's jump right in. So, what Generation 3 gets right? Number 1. The game speed. Probably the best thing about this generation is quite simple, really. The speed and pacing of this generation are absolutely perfect in my opinion. The games never feel bogged down or too slow at any point, and you can make significant progress into a save in only a few hours or even less. If you run into a wild Pokemon, you can quickly get through a battle or run away. This doesn't sound too important, but when you run into wild Pokemon all the time, this really adds up. Not only that, but you can finally run in this generation, and you get some cool bikes which add to the speed. This isn't to say that these games feel short, however. On the contrary, these games are loaded with so many things to do, areas to find, and Pokemon to catch, that even though the game speed is fast, it still takes a long time to do everything, and offers a really fulfilling gameplay experience, with an even higher level of replayability. Number 2. The Pokemon. I know I've said this every generation so far, but bear with me because there will be times where the Pokemon falls into the other category. But anyways, the Pokemon for this generation had a very unique style. It was almost like an ancient Mexican, Aztec, Mayan, whatever you want to call it, theme. 132 new Pokemon, but you could catch up to 202 in the game with the inclusion of Pokemon from previous generations, like Zubat and Magnemite for example. And this style worked amazingly well in my opinion, and, for me, is what really separates this generation of Pokemon from any other. This time, almost all of them were completely original, with the exception of 2 baby Pokemon, Azurill and Wynaut. This makes sense because many of the Generation 2 Pokemon were actually supposed to be in Generation 1, even appearing quite early in the anime. I could be wrong, but I don't think any of the Generation 3 Pokemon were planned to be in Generations 1 or 2. They added in many more Dark Steel, Grass, and Bug types, which I thought was pretty cool, and specifically for Dark and Steel, these additions were much needed. They also added many completely unique typings, so many that it would be a pain to list them all, but some include Fire Fighting, Bug Ghost, and Grass Dark. I actually want to continue this point and discuss some of the coolest Pokemon from this generation. The version exclusives were all really well done, and made you want to get the other version of the series. Shedinja's Wonder Guard with 1 HP and the new Bug Ghost type, along with its unique evolution requirements, made it one of the most unique Pokemon ever. It can either sweep someone's team or get killed instantly. Really fun to use at times. Sableye's Dark Ghost typing makes it so that no move is super effective against it. Feebas was also incredibly rare due to being only able to capture it on 5 or 6 tiles in the entire game, and its evolution involving beauty made it one of a kind. Kecleon's appearances in the overworld were interesting as well, albeit only for a small portion of the game. Build him as a gift Pokemon from Steven was just more incentive to continue the game after the Elite Four. I just wish that Jirachi was actually available in-game somehow. Pun intended. There were so many false rumors at the time involving Moss Deep Spaceship that really added to the Pokemon's allure. The starters. I'll just say it, the best 3 starters of any generation, period. For me, this isn't really even up for debate. Every single starter looked incredible and proved an incredibly viable asset to your team. Generations 1 and 3 are the only generations of Pokemon where every time I start, I have a real difficulty deciding who to pick. They are all so unique and cool. In fact, I've never quite seen such disagreement on which starter is everyone's favorite because they are all so well made. My only complaint is that I wasn't crazy about Combusken's design. Looks a bit like a bowling pin. But Blaziken and Torchic more than made up for the line. Firefighting is such a good combo, and was completely unique at the time. Water Ground was almost unheard of before Generation 3, with Wooper and Quagsire being the only other 2 previously with it. Even though Sceptile was just a relatively boring pure grass type, even though I thought he could have easily been Grass Dark, It's possible the Game Freak decided there were already too many Dark-type Pokemon added in, or because Shiftry would have been the same typing. Sceptile looks incredible, and Leaf Blade is an outstanding move. It was the best grass move in the entire series at the time, with the only other possible contender being Giga Drain. The Leaf Blade has 3 times the PP, higher power, and a higher critical hit ratio. Only Grovyle Sceptile could learn it. It was really cool how the game designers gave each starter a unique move. Blaze Kick, Muddy Water, and Leaf Blade were all unique and powerful attacks that made holding onto your starter a must. You could pretty much sweep through the game with a Blaziken, but even Swampert and Sceptile could smash their way through almost anything. In fact, Blaziken was so good that Game Freak became aware of this before Emerald version was released. So in Emerald version, they actually made Wallace, the Water-type gym leader from Ruby and Sapphire, the Elite Four champion. The bad guys. Team Magma and Team Aqua. Finally, someone different than Team Rocket. The storylines for each of these teams was really enjoyable, and fighting them took you from the tops of mountains to the depths of the ocean. They were more concerned with legendary Pokemon than Team Rocket were, and each had a very radical ideology, making them seem even more evil. I've battled Maxie way too many times in my Ruby version. The leaders always provide a very good challenge as well. Double battles. Generation 3 introduced the concept of double battles, something that would become a trademark of the Pokemon series. The game designers even made it so that some of the moves could hit both opposing Pokemon, or each one on the field of play. Double battles added a whole new dimension to strategy to Pokemon. It was pretty revolutionary, especially at the time. We even got a double battle for Moss Deep Gym against the Twins, which was really cool, and helped display how version exclusives could be used together for double battles, specifically referencing Plusle and Mayan. The world. Hoenn was a fantastically diverse region, ranging from almost every climate you can imagine. This allowed for an array of different Pokemon that was specific to that region. Admittedly, the beginning and ending of your journey is quite boring and monotonous due to this relative lack of regional diversity. However, the majority of Hoenn makes up for this deficiency. Not only that, but all the hidden areas make this world really fun to explore. The music. Apparently this is controversial, but I'm not quite sure why. I thought Generation 3's music was the best out of any generation ever. Each soundtrack really fit the region and created a fantastic atmosphere. The best and most memorable soundtrack for me has to be Route 120 after Fortree City. But many of the important battles had a really foreboding and epic character to them, which really helped set the mood for the encounter. The main complaint I hear about this generation's music is that too many trumpets were used. But to me, this is a stupid complaint. Many instruments were used in the making of this soundtrack, but specifically the trumpets, in my opinion, worked really well in creating the atmosphere of a grand adventure. I think the people who complain about this point are really just nitpicking, or they hate Generation 3 and are looking for ways to complain. You don't see them complaining about how outdated the first 2 generations' music are, or how stupid or horrid some of the futuristic music sounds in later generations. Consistency, people! The gyms. I thought each gym was really well done and provided quite the challenge to beat. Each gym had a pretty cool gimmick to get through to the gym leader. I'm actually pretty disappointed Emerald version changed Moss Deep's gym style. With that said, the gyms were nothing really extraordinary, although battling your father and having a double gym battle were both pretty cool additions. Dive. A pretty cool feature that added a new dimension to exploring the overworld. The underwater areas were littered with unique wild Pokemon, hidden items, and secret areas. You even needed to explore under the sea to complete the game and activate the legendaries, which I thought helped to substantiate the feature as more than just a cool accessory. My only complaint would be that some areas felt a little empty, although not running into wild Pokemon unless in seaweed helped out a bit. The legendaries. The legendaries for this game were really special and unique in a lot of ways. First, let's start off with Groudon and Kyogre. They were involved in the main story and provided the driving force for teams Aqua and Magma. It was interesting how you were forced to battle them even before beating every gym, which added a little dynamism and unpredictability on first playthrough. The harsh sunlight and drenching rainfall in the overworld helped illustrate the sheer power of these beasts. Next, the Regis. If you managed to unlock these legendaries without looking at any guides, you were either incredibly persistent or just a liar. I really loved all the specific steps you had to take to even activate the Regis. I feel as though Game Freak was paying homage to all the crazy rumors of getting Mew and Celebi from the previous generations by making one themselves. I mean, how the fuck would you know how to do all these steps in a very specific fashion without some sort of guide? It was awesome. Latios and Latias offered some roaming legendaries for after the Elite Four. Likewise, Rayquaza provided some story depth, but mostly was just the Mewtwo-like legendary for the post-game. It's a shame they didn't include Jirachi or Deoxys in the game, only through events. Actually, it's interesting, Deoxys and Mew both had special events and islands built into the game that were only unlockable through events or hacking. If you haven't seen these islands yet, go look around online. They're really intriguing and well worth the watch. Jirachi was available through pre-ordering Pokemon Colosseum, but not Celebi, which made me pretty upset because Celebi was actually present in Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness. Why is he so elusive? Ugh. So many fake rumors throughout the years over how to catch Jirachi actually seem believable when compared to unlocking the Regis. The Trick House. The Trick House was a neat little side quest you could complete during the course of the game. Each Trick House required you to go around some unique obstacles and trainers to make it to the Trick Master at the end, who could give you some cool items. It was a neat little feature incorporated into the game. Secret Bases. This was a really cool accessory to the game in the overworld. You could carve out a tree or a cave and put a bunch of furniture to make your own little base. If you mixed records with your friends, you could even hunt for theirs and battle them inside. It was always a blast trying to find the most obscure location for a secret base so your friends could never find you. The Safari Zone. Thank goodness they brought it back. Nothing too special here, but honestly, why they didn't have a Safari Zone in Generation 2 is really beyond me. In Emerald, after you beat the Elite Four, you can even catch Johto Pokemon in the Safari Zone. I just wish they allowed you to catch more of them before the Elite Four. More berries. Yes, berries were introduced in Generation 2, something I actually forgot to mention in my previous review. Generation 3 improved on this by creating a more diverse and interesting cast of berries, not just for battle, but also for Pokemon contests. You could blend the berries up in a cool little minigame to make Pokeblocks, which brings me to my next point, Pokemon contests and Pokeblocks. Another great feature added to the Pokemon series. Pokemon contests really provided an interesting minigame involving Pokemon's contest stats and contest move. Each move in the game also actually had a different effect in contests. They were really fun to play, and matching berries up was quite satisfying. I remember even crafting some Pokemon to specifically be used for contests. Overall, just a great feature. The Battle Frontier. Only present in Emerald, unfortunately. The Battle Frontier created an exciting post-game experience where you could go through a variety of trials, collect new Pokemon, and get some essential competitive items. Countless in-game events. Along with all the events already listed, the in-game events were really well done and contributed to the storyline. There's really too many to list, so I won't go too into detail. No more annoying phone calls every 2 seconds. And did I mention you can finally run? Thank goodness. There were also 2 types of bikes, which added another dimension to the overworld because some paths were accessible to only one type of bike. Really made you go looking everywhere to find everything, and really helped add to replayability. And there's really just so much more to list, but I can't really go into everything. This list is already getting long enough, as you can tell, so I'll just go on to the next part. What Generation 3 gets wrong? Too much water. This is probably the most common complaint of this generation you will hear, and not for a bad reason. Almost a third of the map is water. That's absurd. Wingull was the new Zubat. At least Tentacool, when evolved, is a pretty viable Pokemon in battles. Fortunately, they did add Dive as an overworld ability, which I thought was really cool and well done, although sometimes it did feel a bit empty under the sea. For the most part though, they were exclusive Pokemon and items you could only find by going underwater. There were also, spoilers here, hidden bases and legendary Pokemon events underwater, so that was pretty cool and well done in my opinion. For the most part though, I would have preferred a smaller water section for Hoenn. I think the point of there being too much water is exaggerated just a bit. It was well done for the most part, just excessive. Game Freak doesn't really understand the concept of type balance. They only added 4 new electric Pokemon, and one of those, Manectric, was even worth using. To be fair, Manectric was pretty cool. He even got a clone in Generation 4. Only 6 new fire types, and 3 of those were the Torchic line. At least Blaziken was overpowered, I guess. They actually only added 5 new poison types, which I liked quite a bit because that type was way too common anyways. They did add a lot more steel and dark types, something that should have happened in Generation 2. Still no physical and special split. Fortunately, the next generation would fix this, but until then some Pokemon really got screwed over. Just to name a few: Mightyena, Beautyfly, Shiftry, Exploud, Sharpedo, Cacturne, Groudon, and Absol. Notice a trend here? 6 out of the 8 of these fully evolved Pokemon were Dark-type Pokemon. They were also powerful in terms of attack, but Dark was still considered a special type attack, rendering that high attack stat useless in terms of stab moves. I'm fairly certain that Game Freak finally decided to split moves into physical and special because of how underwhelming many of their new cool Dark types were performing in battle. Removal of Night. I don't really understand why Game Freak decided to remove the Night from this generation. This could have been really well done with all the new Dark Pokemon they put in, but no. They just took it out for no reason. It was a really cool feature in Generation 2 as well. They even still have clocks and time-based events, which makes this point even more infuriating and ultimately confusing. The Game Corner. My only real complaint is that they took away buying Pokemon. I guess the Hoenn government finds the sale of Pokemon at a casino a bit too scummy. May. She would have been alright if you could have actually fought against her fully evolved starter Pokemon. Also, her last battle being optional is pretty underwhelming. Wally. Sort of underwhelming and forgettable. He never really feels like a challenge until the very end, and you completely miss out on most of his development, unlike May. Post-game? Although getting the legendaries was enthralling, there wasn't much to do after Elite Four, with the exception of the Battle of Frontier and Emerald, and even that was dwarfed by post-game features in future generations, which you'll find out in later reviews. The Berry Glitch. A small but annoying feature. I never really planted berries anyway, but after a few years the internal clock in your game copy could stop working, and berries wouldn't grow if planted. If you couldn't already tell, yeah, this generation of Pokemon is my favorite one, by a long shot with the exception of Generation 2. That's not to say it was the best in every aspect or didn't have its problems, but for me, Generation 3 was, and continues to be, the most fun Pokemon generation ever made. I really don't understand the people who knock this generation. I can still easily pop in my Ruby version and start playing and make good progress after not a long time because Game Freak got the game speed absolutely perfect. There was also no save file problem like there was in the Game Boy Color games of Gold, Silver, and Crystal. Generation 3's replayability is honestly unmatched by almost any game, ever. Yes, I am making that claim. I've never played another game more times. I can't tell you how many times I've played and beaten games in this generation, because it's really too many to count. It's just that good. If you haven't already played it, go. Now, go get it. With that being said, Generation 2 is still amazing in many other ways, and came very close to being as good as Generation 3. Actually, I had a really hard time deciding which generation was better, but having played Generation 3 countless more times, the number sort of speaks for itself. It's quite unfortunate that my Gold and Crystal games can no longer hold a save file. Maybe that would have made my opinion different, but probably not. So for me, I rate this game overall out of 10 a 9.5, and for the series, first out of 6. Alright, and that's it. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for my Generation 4 review. Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments.